This week marks 162 years since the very first Women's Rights Conference was held in this country. In 1848, in the town of Seneca Falls, New York, approximately 300 men and women. By the way, I want to thank the men for being here today. I appreciate every one of you, and thank you for supporting us. This is not a women's conference. It's about women. So we thank the men that have come and supported us today. But approximately 300 men and women gathered in a Methodist church in 1848 to demand functional equality for all women in their homes, in their churches, and in their society. This was a predominantly Christian-led event. Christians have a rich heritage in the history of women's rights. We get a really bad rap. Rights are always mostly, quotes, selfish, preceded by the word selfish, when applied to women. But all rights are not selfish. Many rights are God-given. So we should be proud of our Christian heritage and the involvement of Christian men and women in the movement for women's rights in general. The first Christian denomination that I know of that stood up and spoke out for the rights of all people, regardless of sex, regardless of color, were the Quakers, the Society of Friends. They had some difficulty at first learning to apply their convictions. However, they did manage to succeed. The very first person, the very first Quaker that ever stood up and spoke out against the sin of slavery in this country was a woman. Now, for her courage and for her convictions, she was disfellowshipped from her Quaker meeting. But this woman stood and held her testimony until the day of her death. And since that time, the Society of Friends has never disfellowshipped another friend for speaking out against slavery, but rather they began to disfellowship for owning slaves. Angelina Grimke, another Quaker, left her wealthy, slave-owning family to become an abolitionist. One of those abolition women that were turning the world upside down. Now, she also believed in women's rights, and she and her husband, Theodore Weld, lived a very happy, harmonious life for many years until Angelina died at the age of, I believe it was 82. Christian women. Angelina Grimke was the first woman to ever stand before a state legislature in our country. She did this on behalf of those who could not speak for themselves, petitioning the government to free the slaves. Harriet Tubman. They called her Moses. Woman of God. Risked her life on a yearly basis for 20 years. 19, 20 trips south in the dead of winter to lead people to the freedom that she had found. She said, if I could have convinced more slaves that they were slaves, I could have freed thousands more. The Moses of her people. Woman of God. Never missed a woman's rights meeting if she could help it, even though she fell asleep at one or two because of a head injury that was inflicted upon her. 1848, first women's rights convention ever. Well, today, and in 1848, that convention was known in history as the Seneca Falls Women's Rights Convention. So today it's 2010. We're in Orlando, Florida, at the Seneca Falls II Christian Women's Rights Convention. We are here to demand that evangelical Christian leaders acknowledge the God-given right of every Christian woman to functional equality within her home and within her church, within her society.